In this video, I sit down and answer some of the most common questions we get from our clients, from our community, around the biggest marketing challenges you're facing and how to improve your marketing results. And I'm not holding anything back. In fact, these are some of the exact same strategies that we've used with clients in a range of different industries over the past few years to generate tens of millions of pounds in additional trackable revenue. I'll be breaking down exactly what I would do if I was in your position to start rapidly improving the results that you are getting. And I'm thinking of making this into a regular series, so if there's any questions that I've missed that you would like me to answer in the next video, be sure to drop it in the comments below and I'll do my best to cover it in one of the upcoming videos. I've also chaptered this video so you can skip through to the questions that you feel are the most relevant to you. So let's get straight into it. All right, so this is a big one. One of the questions we're seeing a lot at the moment is around the quality, or how to improve the quality of your tracking and analytics data so that you can actually attribute where your leads and sales are coming from. This is a really big thing at the moment. And if you've been tracking your marketing analytics for some time, you've probably noticed a deterioration in the data that you're actually seeing. We are seeing these days more and more traffic coming through when you look in reports in GA4 being reported as direct traffic or unassigned or unattributed traffic, and less traffic coming from the sources that you might expect to be seeing, so paid search or paid social campaigns or maybe even organic traffic. The issue that's happening at the moment is more and more apps and browsers and devices are taking a privacy first approach, which means they're stripping out a lot of the source parameters and source information that will show analytics platform where that visitor came from. There's also a lot more people using privacy browsers, which by default are very aggressive in terms of removing any of that source information. So it is just getting harder and harder to attribute where leads and sales are coming from. There's really two main things you can do here. One of them is going to be to add in self-attribution form fields into any of the either sign-up forms if you're generating leads, or on the checkout or post-checkout experience if you're running an e-com store. And also, one tip I'll give you here, if you do think about doing this, I would highly recommend actually having this as an open text field. The reason being is because you will get so much more detailed information when you allow people to tell you where they heard about you. We very often see when people use drop-down fields, you might be missing out on crucial information. So for example, if there's an option that you haven't listed in the drop-down field, you might actually find that people are hearing about you from a channel that you don't even know about. And that channel could be generating you hundreds of thousands or millions of pounds in revenue that you wouldn't have otherwise realized. So by having it as an open form field, you're able to get much richer information. Now you can still use AI or whatever you want to then distill that information down and categorize it afterwards, but just having that richer information is really going to help you get a better understanding of what platforms, what customer journeys are actually generating leads and sales for your business. The second thing you can look at doing here is using some third-party attribution tracking software. So there are platforms out there like Triple Whale, Wicked Reports, Hyros, that will allow you to take a cookieless approach to tracking the visitors coming through to your site. It's worth saying that even these attribution tracking softwares, they aren't going to be 100% reliable, but they will get you much cleaner data in terms of where your users are actually coming from. They're also great for giving you attribution for much longer buying cycles. So if you are in a lead generation business, if you're working in B2B where you have fairly long buying cycles, or maybe you're selling high ticket, so that purchase happens over a long period of time that maybe falls outside of typical attribution windows of most platforms, by having these third-party tools, a lot of them will allow you to extend that attribution window so you can get a much better understanding of where the original touch point was for that sale and then where the last touch was. Everything from the first click of that contact all the way up until the point of sale. Now, one final point to mention here is when it actually comes to measurement and setting KPIs for your marketing, because with this in mind, if you aren't able to track where a lot of your sales are coming from, naturally you might actually be seeing a decline in your ROAS. And we sometimes see this from clients where it looks like their ROAS are going down, but their sales haven't actually gone down. And if anything, sales might even be increasing. So if you have seen ROAS going down, but you haven't seen an actual decline in sales, you'll want to think twice about pulling your budget away from those platforms, because it might just be that you're actually losing out on a lot of sales or leads that you just aren't tracking at the moment. So what we're doing with a lot of clients at the moment is, instead of just purely tracking platform ROAS, we're measuring marketing efficiency ratio, which is basically looking at your total marketing spend to the total amount of revenue that the business has generated. So naturally, there will be a kind of baseline revenue that you might be on right now that you're generating through organic means, through word of mouth, whatever it is. But if you're increasing your marketing spend on certain channels, what you should start to see over time, again, depending on the buying cycle, you should start to see the actual revenue increasing in correlation with that, if the marketing is actually working. So by tracking your marketing efficiency ratio, it allows you to get out of the weeds in terms of tracking the specific platform ROAS, which you might not be able to see due to failed attribution, but it allows you to track your overall marketing performance over time. So this is another very common question we get actually from marketing managers when they're working as part of a team, or maybe they're reporting into a leadership team, the directors, C-suite, whatever it is. How do you manage the need for generating results and revenue with the longer term plays and strategies? Really, the key here is from setting expectations from the outset. So if you know you're going to be taking an approach that is going to be a long-term approach, that expectation needs to be set up front, because naturally, if you're not mentioning that, or you're not setting expectations that this is going to be a longer term play, you're going to get a lot of pushback when in a few months you haven't already started generating leads or sales. A lot of marketing these days does come down to that intuition and just knowing what kind of things are working and being able to kind of bet on more of a long-term play instead of always looking for those short-term wins. So it's critical that you're setting expectations internally with your leadership team, with any other stakeholders in the business, so they're all aware of what the actual plan and the strategy is. The next thing you'll want to do is to create some both lead metrics, so lead indicators you can track, and lag indicators. So naturally, the lead indicators are going to be signs or signals that we can track that show us that we're going at least in the right direction with our marketing, and the lag indicators are then going to be the actual results that we want to see in the long term, i.e. an increase in leads, sales, or revenue for the business. So an example of lead indicators might be, let's say we're running a B2B enterprise sales campaign, right, where we're selling a B2B SaaS product to enterprise level clients. So we've got a very long buying cycle. And let's say that we've got a list of target accounts. The lead indicator in this instance might be the level of engagement we have from our target accounts within LinkedIn. Let's say we're running LinkedIn ads. So a great example here, what LinkedIn will actually allow you to do now is to see which companies are actually viewing your content, but also the engagement rate of those companies. So if we can show that we're actually getting views on our video or completions on our videos from our target accounts, it's very, very hard to dispute that that is going to have an impact in the long term of actually building that trust with our brand. So that's a good example there of like a lead indicator that can help to give confidence that our marketing is actually taking an effect and making an impact. If you're a D2C brand, for example, another thing you can look at doing here is actually monitoring branded search over time. So let's say you're running some top of funnel awareness campaigns on social, so maybe on Meta or TikTok, and you're getting really good engagement on them, but we're not seeing those sales come in yet because we know this is part of a longer term play. One of the things you can do is look in Search Console or look in any SEO research tools and look for an increase in the branded search terms over time that shows we're having the impact of staying front of mind, of planting that seed in the heads of our consumers so they are actually looking the brand up. This is usually what we see before we start seeing an increase in sales, and that branded search will begin increasing as we start taking up mind share in that space, and you will then normally just after that start seeing a big increase in sales followed through. So as long as you have those lead indicators, that can help to give you or your team the confidence that the marketing we're doing is actually heading in the right direction, even if we're not near the stage yet where we're ready to start seeing the sales or the revenue from those campaigns. So this is an interesting question actually here we've actually had from someone in our team, which is, do you think digital marketing is saturated and in danger of becoming ineffective? Is there need for more originality from businesses? So I don't think digital marketing as a whole is becoming saturated, but I think the way that people are marketing and the way that businesses are advertising is becoming incredibly saturated. The problem is what's happening is most businesses run ads, right? And nobody wants to see an ad. Nobody wants to consume an ad in their feed. However, it is indisputable that people are consuming content. We're probably consuming more content than ever before. So really, the trick here, this is really just making content that is going to be super specific to your audience, for one, but also it just feels like content people would want to consume. This is really the key to any successful marketing campaign. So whatever your brand is about, whether you can lead with humor, whether you need to lead with information that people haven't heard somewhere else, you really need to find an angle where you can be their go-to source. So again, whether that angle is funny content, whether that angle is useful content that people can't get anywhere else, whether this be amazing insights that they can't just find online from other places. Businesses need to think about how they can become the go-to in their industry for whatever they do. So instead of just going onto ChatGPT and typing in, content ideas for this business, really think about what are those things? How can you go over and above to make content that people can't just get elsewhere? The problem that's happening is businesses are just copying each other. They see an idea that their competitors are doing and they try and do the same thing. And then by nature, you all end up doing, you see this in so many industries where they're all just doing the same thing. And then you wonder why people aren't engaging with that content. You have to think about how you can make something original that people can't find elsewhere. That kind of thing where it makes people want to come back for more of it, and they then start seeing you as the go-to in whatever space you are operating in. However, one thing I will also say here is I think we have also got to a point where we are almost becoming a bit too reliant on digital as a whole. You have to remember that there are other forms of marketing. Something I talked about in my last video actually was even going back to direct mail campaigns, which people think is crazy talk these days, but actually there's a lot of stats to show that direct mail campaigns, the results from them are through the roof these days. And it's because in a world where people's inboxes are more saturated than ever, people are getting more and more spam than ever, your open rates, you might be lucky to get 50-60% open rates, right? So maybe you're struggling to get half of your list to even open your emails. So if you can deliver a leaflet to your disengaged customers through their doors, you've pretty much got a guaranteed open rate because they have to pick that leaflet up off the floor. So whether it be a card, a magazine, a letter, even going back to the old school days of some of the great copywriters, a lot of them talk about doing things like delivering a direct mail in a gold envelope or a red envelope, right? It's going to stand out. That kind of thing. If you just deliver something like everybody else in a white envelope where it looks like a bill, where people are probably going to want to chuck it in the bin, you're not really going to see much success. But if you can do things a little differently, it's like the saying, when people zig, you want to zag, you want to go the other way. So there is definitely something to be said for, the word digital, and that being, I think we're putting too much emphasis on that. Marketing is marketing. how can we get in front of our customers, whether that be out of home advertising, whether it be guerrilla marketing that you do on the high street, whether it be direct mail campaigns, or even just speaking to customers, events. There's all sorts of other ways to market your business, so it doesn't just have to be digital. So that is actually a really good point. I don't think digital is saturated. I don't think it's broken. I think you can still get results from digital, but it is worth remembering that there are other forms of advertising, and sometimes when everybody is going one way, there can be a lot of value in going the other way as well. What do you do personally to keep up with the fast-paced and ever-changing landscape of digital marketing? It's an interesting question, this, because I think there's two sides to this that I try to do. I try to strike a balance between finding what the new technology, the new innovations are, the new trends that are happening in marketing. But I also like to keep myself firmly grounded in terms of the fundamental principles of marketing, of human behavior, of what we know about human psychology and why people do the things they do. That's why I really love reading books by some of the old school great copywriters of all time, Eugene Schwartz, David Ogilvy. Those books are such fascinating insights into just human behavior. If you think back in the day when it was just print advertising or direct mail campaigns, if you're putting a letter through somebody's door to try and sell something, that is selling and marketing at its finest, right? That is the hardest marketing ever. You're just selling to a stranger through literally a long form letter. The amount of insight you need into people's psyches to grab their attention and read an actual long form letter is just so insane, and you can learn so much from those books that still stands the test of time today. So I find it really useful to not get too caught up in all the latest tech and gadgets, because I often see what happens is people go out there with these campaigns and they use all of these tools and technology and AI video generation tools, and their marketing just completely flops because they've forgotten about the human element behind it. They've forgotten that people aren't just we're not algorithmic machines that follow the rules. Humans are weird, emotional, quirky beings, right? You can't necessarily fit us into a box. So just understanding the intricacies and the nuances behind human behavior and why people do the things they do. I really think it's important to, whatever new marketing tactics or trends you're looking at, you do also have to ground yourself just with those fundamental principles of marketing, what gets people to buy. Another thing I love to do as well, and this might sound like a weird thing to say, but is just practicing self-awareness. So whenever I see an ad or whenever I buy something, I stop and ask myself, why did I just buy that? What was it? What have I seen that has developed this trust for this brand over time? Was it the ad? Is it that I've seen a lot of ads? Is it that I've seen other people talking about this product, maybe through influencer marketing campaigns? Or if I've clicked on an ad, why did I click on that ad? Even if I've stopped in my feed, I will go back and look at that image and say, why did I stop? What made me stop? Out of the infinite posts, videos, images in my feed that I could have stopped on, why did I stop on this one? It's such a powerful lesson to just take a minute and look at your own behaviors, how you respond to different things in your feed. And I promise you, if you look at the way that you are marketing your business right now, it's probably very, very different to what the ads that are grabbing your attention are doing. So this can be a really powerful exercise to do. What are these things that are actually driving my behaviors and getting me to click, getting me to buy, that are building trust? Or maybe even the opposite. Maybe if you see an ad and it has the opposite effect. Why does it have the opposite effect? Maybe it's too pushy. Maybe it's too salesy. Again, this is something that you can take into your own marketing. Because this is something we're very often saying to clients. And when we're auditing ad accounts where their ROAS has tanked, when we look at their ads, it's because all of their ads are just so pushy. They just look and feel and smell like ads. And it's like I said earlier, if your ads start to look like ads, they are not going to perform. If it feels like native content, then they will start to perform. So again, this is really key, just to look at your own behaviors. So they're the things I try to do. One, look at the kind of fundamental principles around marketing, read the books from some of the old school great copywriters, but also looking at the current trends and the current new tactics and technologies that are coming out on the scene. And then also finally, just practicing self-awareness so that when you are engaging with any ads for yourself, or when you are thinking about a brand to buy from, ask yourself, why did that brand come to mind? Why did I just buy this product? Why did I just click on this ad? Why did I stop on my feed here? Maybe it's not even an ad. Maybe it's just a post that you've seen from somebody on LinkedIn. Ask yourself, what was it? Was it the hook? Was it the headline? Was it the image they used? Was it all of those things? If you can make a mental note of that, you will find yourself just getting naturally better at marketing over time, and you can then take those insights into your own marketing efforts. Can you share what you think will be the future of digital marketing? How do you think it will evolve in the next 5 to 10 years? Jesus, I have no idea. I mean, the rate at which AI is progressing at the moment and technology is progressing, the landscape in flipping out 10 years from now could look very, very different, right? But I think one thing that is definitely going to happen without a doubt, and is happening as we speak, is that marketing is just going to become more and more individualized and personalized. Like, one of the things that you are definitely seeing right now, and this even happened from the rise of influencer marketing years ago now, is that people do trust other people more than brands. And you see this all the time with these, celebrity founded brands that just have insane growth, and they grow because there is an influencer behind the brand. And even now, some of the brands that have in the past, brands or companies that in the past have been completely faceless organizations, a lot of their leadership team are actually now coming out and taking a more forward-facing, customer-facing role in the business. They are creating content, they are going on podcasts, they're writing books, because they see how important it is to actually have a face behind the brand. So I think this trend is absolutely going to continue. Exactly how that's going to look, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure there will probably be things like much more in the mixed reality, augmented reality, virtual reality spaces. I think a trend that I'm really interested in at the moment, and something I'm seeing, is like personalized ads in things like gaming, for example. I think there is huge opportunity and potential there to even have like dynamic ads or ad networks, where if you imagine in games like Grand Theft Auto or any of these open world games, for advertisers to actually be able to put their ads dynamically on billboards within the games, right? And that then becomes a monetization channel for the developers or the publishers of the game as well. There's really interesting things that I think could happen there. And, when you look at how many people are playing and, playing games as a medium these days, whether it be on their mobiles, whether it be on consoles, on PC, the numbers are through the roof. It's one of the biggest entertainment mediums out there. So it'd be insane for advertisers not to tap into it. So I think there's all sorts of things that are going to happen, where it's going to be about, one, reaching people through that more human personalized content, but two, reaching people where they're actually at. Right? This has always been a really big part of marketing. It's like, where are your customers hanging out? It's always a really important question to ask. So in terms of exactly how marketing is going to look, I have no idea, but I think they're the main trends that we will start to see continuing over the next 5-10 years. So this is an interesting one. Best way to grow brand while still marketing my company. I would actually argue that these, when done right, are one and the same thing. if your marketing is truly effective, I think it should also do the job of building your brand as well. And this comes back to what I said earlier, in that if you're just running ads, the ads probably aren't going to perform, for one, but you're also not going to do any favors for your brand either. If you can run ads that feel more like content and that they are more informative and educational and people actually want to consume them, they're not only going to do the job of marketing your business for you, but they're also going to build your brand as well. So I think actually any ads that you're running should be doing the job of building your brand and marketing the business. Best retargeting strategies for companies with large social media followings. This is an interesting one because I sometimes see companies that have huge social media followings, but when speaking to their team, it turns out that somebody has bought a load of followers back in the day, right? Or they paid money and they've just got, a bunch of 50,000 or 100,000 followers, and half of those accounts are bots. So you do need to be very careful, because if you go down the retargeting route of just retargeting all of your account followers, you could end up in a situation where you're just literally throwing that money down the drain. So I do think you have to be careful, and you need to know that the following you've got is actually a truly engaged audience. Now, you're never going to be able to exclude bots 100%. Any social media account out there is going to have a degree of bot following, or maybe people who are just following you because they want a job. Maybe it's competitors following you. You're always going to get some degree of that, right? That can't be avoided. But if you know of anything that you've done to artificially boost your follow count, you do want to be careful about running those campaigns. We also do see this a lot with B2B as well. And one of the benefits actually that you've got if you've got a LinkedIn company page, for example, LinkedIn actually gives you some pretty interesting statistics on the demographics of the companies that are actually following you. So you can actually get a bit of a gauge as to whether or not that follower base actually even fits into your ideal customer persona. So there may be some things you can do there to double check first before you do run those retargeting campaigns. Okay, so what's the most effective way of reducing cost per click? So this is a question that I see a lot, and I want to challenge the way that you're thinking about this, because very often, and this actually doesn't even matter whether you're talking about cost per impression, cost per click, cost per lead, even cost per acquisition or cost per sale a lot of the time. And the reason being here is because getting the lowest cost per sale doesn't necessarily mean you're getting the best return on your ad spend. For example, we very often see brands where they might focus purely on getting campaigns with the lowest possible cost per acquisition, but then what they find is that those sales that they're now getting are just one-time purchases, or they're people buying very low value items, whereas they might have then had another campaign that had a slightly higher cost per acquisition, but they had 3 times the customer value behind it, and they were spending more as an average order value. This can also apply to B2B, where you might be seeing a campaign that you're generating loads more leads, or leads at a cheaper cost, but when you actually look in the pipeline, you've got a way lower conversion rate in terms of those leads actually converting into paying customers. You might then have campaigns that have got double the cost per lead, but there's also 3 times more of them turning into actually sales and closed opportunities on the back end. So you do have to think very, very carefully before you start trying to drive down those front end metrics, and you really want to look at the bigger picture and measure this by your campaigns. So really what you want to be doing is looking at, the best example here is to look at your customer acquisition cost to lifetime value. Like, the bigger you can get that split, the bigger you can get your CAC to LTV ratio, the more profitable you're going to be, right? So it's not necessarily about getting the lowest cost per acquisition, but it's about getting the biggest gap between cost per acquisition and lifetime value. That's where you want to find the sweet spot. So please don't obsess over just trying to drive down cost per click, cost per impression, cost per lead, because very, very often the lowest cost per lead campaigns, the lowest cost per click campaigns, they're often not the campaigns that bring in the best results. So just make sure you're looking at your marketing holistically instead of obsessing over any one of these metrics in isolation. So this is actually a question in relation to marketing on Reddit. So this person said, I run a swimwear brand and I'm wondering if you'd rather recommend to create a profile under a personal name or a subreddit, or create a community in order to at some stage promote my brand in a non-salesy way. So I think this is an interesting one. Reddit is a really interesting channel for me because I think there is a lot of opportunity on there, especially if you're selling something that's fairly niche. Reddit has a ton of different subreddits on there in all kinds of different niches. So if you've got a product that does serve a very niche audience, to start engaging with that community can be a great way to generate leads. I actually did a video on marketing on Reddit because we generate probably several leads a week at the moment from just a single Reddit post alone. So it can be a very powerful platform for some businesses. But I think if you're just a swimwear brand and you don't necessarily have a particular niche, it's going to be a little bit difficult to really kind of find the right subreddits to engage in, right? If you are a swimwear brand for triathletes, for example, or professional swimmers, right, then there will be tons of subreddits on, like, you know, performance swimming, or, you know, there's probably subreddits for triathlons and triathletes where you can start engaging with those communities. You know, if people are asking, how do I improve my swim time? Engage with those communities, be seen as an expert in that space. And what you will then find happens, because this is what happens with us all the time, with the answer that I gave a little while ago on LinkedIn advertising, people will then click through to your profile to find out about you. And naturally from there, they will see the brand, they'll click onto your website. So it can actually be a really great way to just get eyeballs on your profile and then on your brand, because Reddit posts just get so many clicks from organic content. So if people are searching in Google, a lot of the time, a lot of the answers that are pushed these days, a lot of the answers that even AI will use actually come from Reddit posts and Reddit forums. So it can be a really interesting platform to leverage, but you do want to find a niche or a community that you can spend your time engaging in and invested in. And that's where I think you're going to get the most traction. Okay, so this is an interesting question about LinkedIn Ads Accelerate campaigns. So LinkedIn recently released a new ad format called Accelerate, which is basically like an AI-assisted campaign generation tool. So this person said, I set an objective of website visits, hoping that a high number of impressions would result in a high click-through rate. Despite achieving 33K impressions in the last 7 days, there were only 0.65% click, so 0.65% CTR, I'm assuming, onto my website. Around 250 visits from the campaign. Sadly, none of those made inquiries. I therefore paused the campaign rather than see more money disappear from my lifetime budget. I'm currently assessing if this is the right advertising strategy for me. Any thoughts or insights would be appreciated. Okay, so look, there's a couple of things here really. One, I would want to know how much you've actually spent on that campaign. The next thing I would ask you is, what is a customer worth to you? This is always the question I ask any client or any potential clients we're working with. Because if you say to me, Tom, we've spent $100 on this campaign and a client is worth $250,000 to us, I would say you're insane. You can't judge the performance of a campaign when you've got a huge customer value like that and you've only spent $100 on your campaign. Realistically, you're probably going to want to be looking at spending thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars to even generate really like a good qualified lead for your business, right? If you can get a lead in for 20K, let's say, and you close 1 in 3 of those leads, so you spent 60K to acquire a customer for a 250K contract, that's actually not a bad deal, right? So you need to think about this realistically. You're not going to find buyers left, right, and center who are going to be spending 250K. Now, if you said to me, we've spent $2,000 on this or £2,000 on this and our average customer value is £500, I would say shut it off, because you've spent nearly 3, 4, 5 times your customer value and you're not seeing any, you haven't even seen an inquiry yet, right? So that is a good sign whatever you're doing is not working. However, even with that said, the layer deeper here that you need to think about is, well, a big thing that's going to impact your actual click-through rate. So you said you got a 0.65% click-through rate, which actually, by the way, on LinkedIn as a benchmark, that isn't terrible. LinkedIn does have a lower click-through rate than a lot of other platforms, but there is room for improvement there. So ideally, we want to be aiming for about 1%, but average LinkedIn click-through rates are pretty low anyway. That aside, your creative is going to be a major variable in how many people actually click through. So my question to you would be, okay, well, over the life of that campaign, how many different creatives did you try? Did you try images? Did you try videos? How many images and videos? How much different copy did you test? How many different headlines did you test? How many different audiences did you test, right? There's so many different variables that go into a campaign. So it's a really difficult question to answer as to whether or not, just based on the pure numbers alone, whether you want to just pull your advertising budget from LinkedIn entirely, or does it make sense to try a little bit more there? Because if you do have a very low lifetime customer value, if you are selling a product or service for under £1,000 or under $1,000, I generally advise businesses to stay away from LinkedIn. And the reason being is because it is one of the highest cost platforms to advertise on. You have very high CPMs, very high CPCs. So you're paying a lot to reach your audience. So I would actually, if you do have a lower customer value, I would encourage you to maybe explore other avenues, whether that be through social ads on Meta, maybe it's even search campaigns, or maybe even outbound would be a better approach for you, depending on where you're at with your business. But yeah, I think there's a few things that you'd need to look at here really before I can tell you whether or not you should kill that off as an opportunity. But this is a great question here that I actually had on Reddit a little while ago. That was, when running top of funnel campaigns, how broadly should you target the initial video campaign? Or do you try to target a really specific audience, or do you keep it a bit broader and just let the video engagement do the filtering? Yeah, so I think on most platforms you will find you will get much better results by actually having a very broad audience, because you're going to have much lower cost per impression overall, and just letting your video be the actual filter. And the way you want to do this is you just want to make sure that you have a very, very clear and specific headline in your video, so you are calling out a specific segment of your audience and turning away everyone who this might not be relevant to. So where this can go horribly wrong when you're running to a broad audience is if you have a video that doesn't explain in the first couple of seconds, or I can't see at a glance what that video is about. Because what you will then find is you'll just get a lot of random people who are just bored. They see a video on their feed, they're watching it, trying to figure out what the hell it's about, and then you've already spent money or wasted money on those individuals to watch it just to figure out what the damn video is about, right? That's not what you want. What you want to do is have a very, very clear headline on there. So for example, if you're selling, let's say consulting for ESPs or CRMs, have a headline on the video that says how to choose the right CRM for your gardening business, how to choose the right CRM for your e-commerce store. That way, I'm not going to start watching that if I don't have an e-commerce store or I don't even know what a CRM is, right? So you want to have something that is very specific and is only going to get the right people watching it. That's how you then let your video become the filter, so you can then get much lower CPMs. And then when it comes to retargeting, the key here is to just retarget the engaged views, right? So that way it's another layer of filtration. So again, even if people do start watching it, but they realize, oh, this isn't even relevant for me, I don't even have an e-com store, we don't want to retarget those people who've just watched a couple of seconds. So we would only want to retarget people who have watched, say, 50% or more of that video. So they saw the headline and they continued watching that video most of the way through. We then know that's a very engaged segment of our audience who are much more likely to be buyers when it comes to us now following up with those retargeting campaigns. So when you're running these top of funnel layers, that's really the key. You want to have a very, very specific hook and audience call out that attracts the right audience up front. But then you also want to make sure when it comes to retargeting, you're not just retargeting all of the engagements on that video, you're just retargeting the most engaged views. And this is why I love using video content as a top of funnel layer as opposed to just images alone, because with images, anyone can just click on an image, right? Whereas with a video, somebody has to be showing a fairly high level of intent to actually stop in their feed and watch 50% or more of a video, right? And that's actually another reason why sometimes longer videos can be quite good for that top of funnel content, because if someone's watched more than 50% of a 1 minute video, 30 seconds, that's actually really good level of engagement for someone stopping in their feed. So that shows a very high level of intent from that viewer, and it gives us the confidence to say we've probably got someone there who is very interested in what we offer. Okay, so final question here, and this is a classic. What, in your opinion, is the key to success in paid advertising? Look, if there was a silver bullet I could give you, I'd be a very rich man. There just isn't a silver bullet to paid advertising. It's going to vary for every business. I've seen some businesses with terrible websites and terrible ad campaigns, but they just have a phenomenal product and it sells. I've seen other businesses where they've got incredible websites and incredible ads, but they just don't have a good product, so people don't buy it. There are so many variables when it comes to paid ads, right? There are just so many things involved in it. So there's not really one thing that I can give you that is going to change all of the results you're getting from your paid ads. However, there are a few fundamental principles that you'll want to think about, right? So one of them is going to be, what are we doing to actually build trust and credibility with our audience up front? So if you're going after a cold audience, if you're trying to attract new buyers for your brand, you always have to think about, why would people choose to buy from you over the competition? Because they're not just going to buy from you because you've shoved an ad in front of their face. Right? So you really have to think about, and this is why we often talk about splitting your campaigns down into the different stages of the funnel, right? Going after the top, middle, and the bottom of funnel. So what that basically means is when people are at the bottom of funnel, that's when they are now already aware of some of the other solutions out there to their problem. You know, these people have already done their research and they're now just looking for someone to buy with. If you can build trust earlier on in the buyer journey, you've got a far better chance of that person actually buying from you instead of the competition. Whereas what you will find, if you're just going after people at the bottom of funnel, they probably already have a preferred company they deal with and will just go to buy from them because there's no real reason to buy from you. Even if you're cheaper or even if you claim to have a better service, there's a switching cost involved in somebody moving over from the brand or the business that they currently buy from to you. So you have to ask yourself, why would they switch if you haven't done a good enough job at building that trust? So one of the keys there again is building that trust and credibility up front. The next thing is going to be that making sure you've got a website that is actually optimized for conversion, so is built in line with CRO best practices, has a good user experience on the site, isn't taking ages to load. And again, the website does a good job to further build that trust and credibility. I'll link to some resources below this video that go into that in a bit more detail as well. So that's all we're going to have time for today, guys. I really hope you found that useful. And if you do have any questions that you'd like me to cover in the next one, just drop them in the comments below or shoot us a DM and we will try to get them covered in the next video. I'll see you then.